And we are recording, and let's see how this works. I'm guessing you can see the article. Yes? Okay. So the subject tonight is an article. I'll just go up. It's from A Moment Magazine, which I highly recommend to you. And the subject that they have a series, and we've read a lot of these in the past. Ask the rabbis, different rabbis from different Jewish movements, what impact will artificial intelligence have on people's spiritual lives? And last time we read the first few, and we are up to Reform. So would someone like to read Reform?
I will.
Thank you, Alan.
The use of technological tools, apps, and online and virtual reality environments for Jews to do Jewish is not new. Ask the Rabbis discussed it in 2018. The pandemic forced us to become even more savvy and intentional about at creating opportunities for Jewish observance and meaningful connections in virtual spaces. With AI technologies, new and challenging questions arise. Can AI create a transcendent, soul-moving prayer or guided meditation? Can AI piece together a playlist of music that will touch the heart in just the right way? For me as a rabbi, it is impossible to meet at any one moment the spiritual need of all those gathered for prayer. An individual person may be able to input just the right data that will enable AI to generate exactly what they need at that moment. Worth trying? Perhaps, but will it feel the same? Much of the AI discussion touts the benefits of the efficiencies it may afford us. We can complete certain tasks more quickly and effectively. I wonder if a greater impact of AI is that it will enable us to open space in our days, to actually attend to our spiritual needs, to take a walk outside, listen to music, hold the hand of a loved one, and connect with that which is greater than ourselves. Rabbi Laura, I know her actually. Anyway, doesn't matter.
And her mom actually lives in our community.
Okay.
Yeah. So, there's a wish there, which my guess is, I'm curious to know how you feel, is, there was always a hope that computers and cell phones and all these other things would free up a lot of time for us. And I'm not so sure that's worked out so well. As I read this, I was thinking more of how we connect on a Zoom meeting like this. And I think you've probably heard me say, I think for purposes like what we're doing right now, I actually think Zoom works very, very well. It's easy to project an article, PowerPoint. I can see everybody clearly, and depending on how you've organized either your phone or your computer, so can you. But I've never felt that services and prayer work as well on Zoom. But
music.
And music, and yeah, trying to sing along is really difficult. Bryce.
Yeah, I just wanted to point out that that at one paragraph she's talking about not AI at all, but what she's talking about is automation. That's time-saving automation. That's in the last paragraph. What she's talking about. It allows us to do more with our time. That's automation.
Yeah,
But the first part of it is totally different.
All right. I was thinking. I'm sorry. Go ahead.
Well, the first part of it, it implies that and I think it's phrased really well, because what she writes is, can AI create a transcendent soul-moving prayer? It doesn't say anything about whether or not the AI has an emotional state or has a consciousness. She's just talking about whether it can create something.
Right.
Okay. And I would say that certain generative AIs could write something that some people will find soul moving. but the more engagement you require, the more it fails. So that's, I would just say it has a limited applicability.
Cheryl?
No, I agree with Bryce. I mean, you can write an algorithm that just reflects back to somebody what you heard them say, and it makes them feel better. But, you know, after the COVID era, most of my patients tell me they rather see me in person than on the computer. There's a sense that they get in the room that I'm there. And to them, it feels better. Yes, do my college students, people traveling, do they benefit because I can do a Zoom meeting for them? Or I have patients who have disabilities, so mobility issues. Yes, this is a great thing, but yet most people like to feel the presence of another human being and know it's real.
Yeah, I'm actually going to be working with a couple living in Japan to plan a wedding, so that would be a little difficult without Zoom. Actually, I'm curious, Cheryl. You know, is it body language? Is it subtle messages? So
Yeah.
what is it that in person that makes the in-person experience different from a, I would say a virtual
Well,
experience?
it's easier to pick up the nuances of nonverbal behavior rather than having to pay attention to, you know, that screen. And it is much easier when they're crying to hand them a tissue, because I find giving them tissues through the computer quite difficult.
And would you also say, you know, is that you're handing someone a tissue is different than them picking up their own tissue?
Yeah, it is, because they know that I'm involved in the process with them. You know, you feel the other person being present there for you, caring, rather than saying to yourself, oh, it's just a freaking computer that, you know, is talking back to me. You know, I mean, you can teach anybody to do that.
It's like the human element's missing there then.
Yeah.
Yeah, but I'm curious, you know, from a
Why do
psychological.
people feel, look, Jerry, why do you feel better petting your cat? What, you know, we're gonna put virtual pets on a computer and you're just gonna go touch them?
Well, if I don't pet her, she'll never stop making a lot of noise.
Okay, Erwin.
Yes, I don't know if any of the attendees read the Nobel Prize winning Ishiguro book, What Happened to Clara in Clara and the Sun. And the AI babysitter was able to do everything with the child as it grew up, and it was a wonderful substitute. But the only thing, when the child grew up and it needed feeling, the AI substitute could not do it.
Okay.
Well, they go back to the old psychology experiment with the little monkey of having a wire monkey that fed the baby monkey, or having it covered in soft terry cloth. And the baby prefers the tactile sensation of that softness and goes to that. There's something.
Yeah, and certainly I notice, you know, when I teach, particularly occasionally, I have been known to try to be funny, sometimes successfully, often not. And it is a very different experience of doing that in person. And, you know, and I'm sure it's body language, reading people's faces and reactions. I'll just go down. Let's see, I haven't heard from Jerry yet. So Jerry.
There.
Oh,
Oh,
go ahead.
She can go. Go ahead, Jerry.
Yep.
That's fine.
I don't know if anyone caught 60 Minutes last night did a big thing on AI.
Oh, no, I didn't. I recorded it though.
It was marvelous. And they basically were saying, yeah, it's a wonderful thing, but just like we were saying, There's no substitute for the human touch. There
Okay,
just isn't.
okay. Jerry Shanit.
Okay, so
Christian.
yeah, thank you. I got you. Yeah. Um, I apologize. I've been in and out of this thing with a lot of business travel and everything. And if you've talked about this last time, but we're making some assumptions that AI is going to do some things which it may never be able to do. Okay, I'm just pointing that out. Bryce, you must have talked about this. There's no
Ad
way
nauseum.
ad nauseum, right? You know, did anybody mention Roger Penrose at all? This whole thing about it now? All right, so you know, physicist Roger Penrose, you may be familiar with him. He did a whole thing about how AI is just never going to really be what you think it's going to be. And I look, do we all remember big data and all that? That was going to revolutionize the world. Yeah, you know, it
Yeah,
didn't.
eliminate paper, right, from the
Yeah, right,
office.
and other things. Well, that
I
was,
can't.
but so you know, there's this whole optimistic trend with this stuff, and a lot of it's driven because there's a lot of money going into it, right?
Advertising, it's the new lemon.
Yeah, whatever it is. So all I'm just going to say, just to make it quick, is say that I'm reading a lot of stuff here that makes some assumptions which I think could just be wrong, right? That, you know, it'll never be the point where, you know, the replicant's going to be indistinguishable from the person or whatever you want, whatever science for you choose your science fiction milieu for this. Isaac Asimov wrote a whole bunch of things about this, you know, over the years and, you know, et cetera. But, you know, we don't really know. So what I'm saying is maybe don't worry about it so much right now. Don't overreact to it. Things will, though it'll be a useful tool, yes. But I think that's really what it's going to be. It's going to be a tool, but not a replacement. And that's my
Okay.
opinion.
Let's read conservative, and then we'll have some more comments because we can. So Alan, you want to continue?
I can.
Okay.
When artificial intelligence is going increasingly good, while artificial intelligence is getting increasingly good at accurately presenting material, and therefore, in a sense, teaching, it will always necessarily and inherently lack the human touch. AI can write a sermon. In fact, it can write a decent sermon, but AI, unlike me, is unable to think about, know, or respond in real time to the Jews in the pews on any Shabbat. I consider what my congregants need, and I try to tell texts that touch the hearts of the listeners based on the weekly parsha, the events of the week, the season of the year, and my own lived experience. While I certainly do not know what is in everyone's heart, I do know a lot that is not searchable online or in books.
Mhm.
Last Shabbat morning, so let's see who that was. Last Shabbat morning, I knew that one woman in our sanctuary was awaiting her later sister's
Her
death.
younger sister's death.
Yeah, I'm sorry, the younger sister's death. I knew another couple were anticipating their married child's first wedding anniversary. Before services, I studied the Torah portion and prepared my sermon. I delivered it with subtle changes and to consider the lives and stories of those in shul that Shabbat morning. In so doing, I taught Torah in ways that I hope are increasingly accessible and relevant. AI cannot possibly answer to every moment or need. It can, and I pray it will. Yeah, it's very cute. I do a lot to bring about benefit for humanity, but it will never have the human touch which we humans need. Rabbi Amy Wallach.
Okay, and you also had your hand up, so
Yeah, so let me go back to the first comments and the question, I guess. The first one, that the question of the thing I observed about the tissue and the handing the tissue, I want to add the word empathy. Because when you hand the tissue in person to somebody, you are conveying a sense of empathy for their issue while they're crying, and you can tell them they open the book, but lift the box, but that's not the same thing. So
yeah,
that one observation.
clearly.
The other, also, I don't think in either of these examples are movement related, either of these rabbis. They're just,
Yeah, we're gonna see,
There's-
I think, if my memory serves me, and I didn't reread it,
Okay.
in some of the Orthodox commentary, I think.
no,
we'll
I
see.
think their points are all worth hearing, but they're not,
Yeah.
it's not, that was, so my question was related to, oh, shoot. Okay, I'll ask it again if it comes to me. Sorry, I lost it.
Okay,
Go ahead.
okay.
Go ahead.
Bryce,
Yeah, two things. One, to respond to your Zoom, how is it different over Zoom? The human beings have many, many, many different channels of communication into our awareness and consciousness. They come in through sensory, many different sensory channels, but there are also idea channels. There are many different, somebody counted up to 50 channels of sensory input that goes into being a human being in company with other human beings. And so you're only getting a couple of those over Zoom, and all of those others are just left lacking the tactile, the sense, the space, the shared space that you have. All of the fact that you're together, all of the psychological components are all missing on Zoom, and they're untouched. Someone else is just untouchable flat. But the other thing I want to say is, it sounds like a bunch of, we're talking, all of these people commenting on AI sound like those wise gentlemen, all the blind gentlemen telling us what an elephant actually is by feeling different parts of it. Okay. And the elephant is AI. Everybody's got a different idea in their writings about what AI is. They have their own imaginings of what it is, and they write to that.
Yeah.
But none of them are coherent with anything else, because AI, in the thinking of many of these folks who are very spiritual people, but they're just approaching it not on the basis of what it is and how it works, but just on the basis of what can it do to destroy what we have.
yeah,
And
and I don't think
attitude.
these writers are looking at how it's going to destroy what we have.
Well, in a sense, or change, or whatever, or what we will lose if it comes. But my point is, every one of them is talking about an entirely different thing.
Yeah, which actually I think is one of the strengths of the, I talk about the image of the blind examining the elephant all the time, and the strength of that is if they talk with each other and compare notes. Erwin, and then Alan.
I would like to say something on a very, very personal experience when I had this horrific experience at Los Robles Medical Center about a year ago. And the doctor said to me, next morning, you're going to have you have to answer some questions. And the machine came in who replaced the psychiatrist. And I want to read something to you. Here is what to watch for. Psychologists and their skill are irreplaceable, but thoughtful and strategic implementation of AI is crucial. And this was written by Dr. Zabra Abrams, July 1st, 2023. And I didn't want to talk to the machine. So I sent the machine away, but I want to ask Cheryl what she thinks about that.
Well, they don't use it at my hospital. I mean,
Well, I mean,
I
is the
can't
machine just a
imagine-
way of filling out a form, Erwin?
I
No,
mean,
it's not for filling up a form. I was bedridden when this machine came into my room and started asking questions about me. One of the questions was if I want to harm myself.
like,
Okay,
it is not happening at my
yeah,
hospital.
I actually
I
never
mean,
heard.
I could not imagine when I'm on the inpatient locked psychiatric unit and a patient wants to throw a chair at me, that, we're sending an expensive computer in to say, are you upset?
Are you saying, Cheryl, we can always get another psychologist, but machines are expensive? Is that the? Okay, Alan.
So, yeah, I've been asked that question, and we all have been asked that question about our state of mind relative to suicide. And I can't imagine, other than a no to the computer, would have a result of what could be useful, right? If the answer is no, they go to the next question. But if it's yes, what does the computer do? Anyway, my point has to do with things getting.
Yeah, I can't imagine, where I've had patients do really crazy things and they're running out of the building and a whole group of us are running after them. What are we supposed to do? Send the machine after you? I mean, we've run across the parking lot and, over things to go grab people.
To Rabbi's point, if you think that computers are expensive, robots are even more expensive.
Exactly.
But my question has to do with getting used to new things and in technology, because I didn't resonate with these other two reform and conservative statements in the sense of AI, because I have this, maybe, and you can clarify this part before I get to my question. AI is a sophisticated way that takes advantage of very powerful computers with huge databases that make it easy to gather things that you and I couldn't gather together. But the example of picking a parsha that reflects the people in the room, I can't see how it could do it, but maybe it could. But that sophisticated computing power and database sizes seems like it's the resource that these AI software are trying to tap into, and we have some sense that they could be more helpful than Google, let's say, Google searches.
Mhm.
Okay, my question has to do with change. So, Rabbi, you probably know Dan Medwin, who was a rabbi for the CAR for a long time. He invented something that maybe all of you have had some exposure, called virtual tefillah. And virtual tefillah, in its original thing, was Dan taking PowerPoint slides and putting the Siddur onto.
So just to explain for not
Yeah.
everyone knows Hebrew. Tefillah means prayer. Siddur is prayer book.
Oh, sorry. So it would be put on a screen instead of needing a physical prayer book. So you're looking forward, but you also have everybody's on the same page is one way to look at it.
Mhm.
Now, the first time I ran into that, I was in a synagogue in Las Vegas. That's not necessarily material. Is I was very uncomfortable at looking up when I was used to holding the book,
Mhm.
and so part of the part about the tissues and everything of the being in touch with the experience, it reminded me, even though visual tefillah wasn't considered AI for sure. This was 15 years ago, probably. But however, when COVID came in and we started to look at the screen to read the pages, I wrote to Dan and I thanked him for introducing us to
Mhm.
this idea that you could actually all be in the same place by looking at a screen. It wasn't a big full screen in the back of on the Bima, but the Zoom experience reminded me of that. The question is, I don't know if this has anything to do with AI. That's the question.
Yeah. So as I was listening to some of the articles and seeing what some of my colleagues have experimented with AI, I mean, I could presumably, I must admit, I have not experimented with AI at all, but presumably I could ask AI to write a sermon or on Leviticus, gearing it toward people who have lost loved ones in the last year. And I suspect that I would get a good, what I would consider as an outline almost that I could modify. And again, Jerry, what's your comment on that?
I've tried it.
Yeah, and
Jerry, please weigh in on what AI is doing when it's
Yeah, I
creating
can, but
something.
let me first answer his question. So, good point. I've tried it, and I've tried it with several different versions of it, and the results were very bad because you, as an expert, would immediately find big holes in the response.
Yeah, so that's part of it. And I think people have used it for writing like cover letters, and some people have a very difficult time just writing a letter.
Okay, but a cover letter you can get, it's built into Word anyway. So it depends on how far you want to go down the rabbit hole with the whole thing, right?
Mhm.
So I mean, so I've used it for several things. I was actually at a conference with some attorneys, And I was talking about, we were demonstrating some AI, and one guy said, well, I want to see it. So he goes, well, what if I wanted to do somebody, lawsuit, this, and we put all the information in and the letter came up. And the guy looked at it and went, well, I'm out of a job because it was really good.
Mhm.
But that's because think of the amount of data that's out there for something like that, right? It's just huge. And, he also had maybe, didn't look at it with a fine tooth comb. There were probably some things that weren't perfect in it, but he thought that he could take that and then in an hour he could turn it into something perfect instead of spending, say, 4 hours on it, right?
Mhm.
You see, so that's the key point. It still needed a little human intervention. And by the way, I don't know if you know this, but a lot of these AI things that you play with online, humans adjust it a little bit. It's that, so, but look, when a child is young, the parent is there helping correct the child as well, right?
Mhm. Mhm.
And AI is a nascent technology, very early on. It's going to take a long time to develop. I think, way longer than we're thinking, probably, decades, if not centuries, it's going to develop. But look, eventually it'll be something amazing. Hard to predict what it's going to be right now, but right now what it is I think something that's just, a little early in and still experimental. There's a lot more we could talk about it, but I'll leave it at that, I guess.
Okay, so
So
Henry, I will.
One thing I do also want to say is that, to echo Jerry, is that humans have to adjust the output for a couple of reasons. One of which is to make sure the AI doesn't tell everybody how much it loves Hitler.
Oh, God.
Okay, Henry.
Yeah, last year I attended a Seder where a lot of the material for the Haggadah was developed by Chat GT or
Yeah,
Yeah.
Yeah.
a tool.
Was it any good, Henry?
it was okay. I mean, it also had some jokes to there too. They were fair.
Now I'm
I
worried.
had it write an analysis of a parshat.
Mhm.
And were you on that one? I did it in the morning on a Saturday morning. I read it.
Oh, I
You,
think
you,
so.
you,
Yeah.
you've done a couple of things and I find it sort of
Yeah.
frighteningly good.
Yeah, well, so I read what the Chat GPT came up with, and it quoted things way outside of the Torah in its Torah analysis.
So now
So
it's getting Talmudic.
no, outside of Judaism,
Yeah,
like
okay.
Catholicism, everything.
Okay,
So
I
it did-
really do want to press ahead. Who would like to read
Yeah.
Modern Orthodox? We'll give Alan a break.
Okay.
I will read.
I
Okay.
guess I could do it if I'm here, if
Okay.
you don't mind.
Go
All right.
ahead, Jerry.
Modern Orthodox. Okay. I
Yes.
believe that artificial intelligence will have little impact on people's spiritual lives. As I understand it, the AI chatbot digests all or most existing materials on a topic, organizes them, and gives answers in light of questions that people pose. That means AI can give us guidance based on past published treatments, but not creative new insights for hitherto unanswered questions or new spiritual challenges. A new creation requires so far human insight and intuition. Most of the great spiritual questions or religious moments that people face, seeking the meaning of life, discerning and connecting to the divine presence, trying to respond to a new way of living, joining a community, repenting for past sins or errors, require a new insight from the human mind, an individual choice made through free will or the decision drawing on an emotional connection to God or Torah. None of these responses can be done for us by an artificial intelligence. I imagine that AI can help people's spiritual life if it can digest, review, and present to the seeker all halachic precedents or other material that could enrich awareness of past behaviors in similar situations. A halachic authority on the individual facing a decision could then act with better grasp of history. But the key decision, the key new insight leading to a turn in life can only come out of a human being's intelligence and holistic response, out of goodwill and our spiritual striving. Future published reports on great spiritual moments, acts of repentance, or new religious vistas will carry a label, contains no artificial ingredients or artificial intelligence. It's Greenberg.
Yeah, and I did. There was a question, I may have mentioned this last week, that came up on the Reform Rabbis chat line, where the rabbi clearly suspected a student's drash for bar mitzvah to have been written by AI. And as the rabbi said, it wasn't bad, but he was very suspicious. And I guess there are now AI tools which can detect whether something is written by AI. And it was written by AI. And then the question that he posed, and I didn't follow all the discussion, is how should he handle this with the student? And it's sort of an interesting question. I've had students for their bar mitzvah, where clearly their drash, their little sermon, was written by their parents. There is no way this kid wrote that sermon. So it's interesting question. Bryce?
Yeah, just a quick one. And I would just say this, the greatest challenge that humanity faces in creating an AI or creating AI in general is that no one has any idea of how natural intelligence works. All right. So we have no idea how to emulate it. We
That's a great
just
point.
try a bunch of stuff. And, if it comes close to the mark and fooling people, everybody raises their hands and goes, goal.
Yeah. So, what I see, and again, the kinds of AI that I think about are things like people generating sermons, people generating essays, people generating, material that really isn't theirs. But there's also, I presume that self-driving cars are an example of AI. Would you?
No,
No?
Yes, it's partially, they claim it's partially.
no,
that.
it's not at all AI. No.
Okay.
Okay.
Well, I don't know
This
what it
the
is.
problem. Here, let me just say something.
Yep.
Here, once again, trunk of the elephant, a side of the elephant. That's the problem here. What Jerry's talking about is strong AI, or AI that has some idea of who it is, what it is, where it is in the world, and what it's doing, and what its goals are, and so forth. That's strong AI. That's what computer science people have been working toward for 60 years. Okay? The AI that other people are talking about here is this kind of, let's throw a whole bunch of documents and develop a statistical model that can generate plausible speech models that people say, oh yeah, that's about what I was talking about. Oh yeah, that looks pretty
Right.
good. Because we've digested so many examples of this, but it can't make anything new at all, ever. Okay?
right.
All it can do is spit out plausible versions of what it's been fed.
Right. I would say, the material I've read is sort of plain vanilla in the
Well,
way of sermons and things.
yeah, but Bryce is right on, and let me just add something quickly for clarity. So what we're really talking about is whether something is a massive database and a very, very fast computer, or is it truly a neural net, right?
Yeah.
And that's the difference, because the human mind, one thing we do know is the human mind is a neural net. And the origins of AI comes out of neural net technology. Now, not to get into what that is, but just to say that that's really at the beginnings of, discovery at this point. It's going to be many, many years before neural nets are
Decades or
effective
centuries.
reality. Okay, but just the key point though is that will be true artificial intelligence because it would operate in the same way that a human brain would be.
Well, and would also, though, it has to have a design as well. Human beings are not just free form neural nets that they have a structure. There's some kind of a
Oh yeah.
structure that implements this idea of I have an existence, I know who I am, and so forth. It generates a model of the world, has goals, a reality, and understands things and novel situations.
And
And
millions
that
of evolution,
is
by the way.
decades or centuries away.
Right, and Bryson, and millions of years of evolution to make that happen. So
That's right.
Okay, Jerry, would you like to continue with Orthodox? So
sure,
this
Orthodox.
is
The
Yitzhak
impact,
Adler's.
the
Sorry.
impact is going to be huge, a global epiphany, and will play out in two different directions. The existence of machines that are smarter than we are will be spiritually devastating to people who see their humanity in terms of intelligence. Others who say that being human includes having emotions will be equally distressed as we start to see machines that can pass a Turing test on emotion as well. Even the first releases of ChatGPT featured some weird conversations with machines that seem to approach emotional reactions. As we come closer to creating machines that are smarter than us and that emote like us, what's left to make human beings special? But the opposite reaction will also take place. A wake-up call to humanity as COVID was, to re-examine our assumptions as to who we are. And people will rediscover the soul, which is something given by God. I'm reminded of the Hasidic version of Descartes. A person came to his Rebbe and said, Rebbe, how do I know that what I'm going through is real? Tradition speaks of Olam HaChalamos, a world of dreams? Maybe I'm just dreaming and there is no reality. The Rebbe did not say cogito ergo sum. He said, tell me, do you ever have thoughts of teshuvah? The man said, yes. And the Rebbe said, in that case, you're not living in an imaginary world, because in an imaginary world, people don't think of doing teshuvah. The impetus for teshuvah comes from the depths of a person's soul, which is deep inside us and comes from God. And I think AI will force people to take a closer look at that.
So again, for those that don't have either Latin or Hebrew, cogito ergo sum, I think, therefore I am, and
Yes.
teshuva means repentance. Alan.
So two things. When you were talking about the rabbi reading the student's sermon and wondering whether the parent had written it, I happened to have pulled mine out the other day because it was the week of last week. It was my parsha, and I know, having read it, that the rabbi wrote it, not my.
And I will say, you know, and again, this is, you know, it's kind of an interesting reflection on what we've been talking about. I will have students who are clearly not capable of writing very well at all. So what I will do is, what I have done, is in effect interview a student. We'll talk about an issue related presumably to the Torah portion. I'll ask them, what do you think? What do you believe about God? And if you know, if the student really can't put sentences together, I will either help him rewrite what he's written, or, you know, I will, you know, I've had kids with learning disabilities, I will write it, and my goal is to write what they think. So,
Yeah, no, I know that. I just had this reaction to your comment. My other question has to do my example of trying GPT, because I think it illustrates the difference between a couple things. So the question I had created when I first got the access to ChatGPT was, what do I need to know in order to do a good job voting in 2024? And Google said, here's a list of media sources: MSNBC, Fox News. It was just in New York Times. There was 10 things that I could go research with the media sources. ChatGPT gave me 5 or 6 sentences, which is, you should study how to vote. You should learn about the candidates. You should figure out what issues are important to you. It was just pretty impressive, because it's exactly, whereas Google was totally, Google did what I said, but you know what I mean? What we want is, sometimes that is what we want. But in my example, ChatGPT was such a great example.
okay, thank you. Jerry, you want to continue with this?
Yeah, and I've found ChatGPT to be completely useless sometimes too. So I don't,
Oh,
all
I'm
right.
sure it is
Yeah.
actually. I picked the
Yeah.
good one. That's for
Very
purpose.
inconsistent. So, okay, Sephardic. Someone once told me that in ancient times, the commandment, you shall not kill, was necessary because people had a murderous nature. But that now, with human society so advanced, we should read the words as you cannot kill, meaning that the soul is eternal and a person never truly dies. I responded that although we have greatly improved our technology, people are still violent. Our advanced society merely provides weapons that facilitate murder on grander scales. Likewise, with AI, we might end up with better technology, but not much difference in our spirituality or our social behavior. Those will still need to be addressed by religious leaders and sensitive thinkers. Our goal should really be AHI, artificial human intelligence. We're not talking of faster computers, but rather an artificial entity. They'll be able to think and act like a human, including with emotional intelligence. To achieve that, the AI will have to be born and raised like a human and feel, experience, and remember the full gamut of the human condition. When that happens, humans might gain a new understanding of humanity, divinity, and the image of God, and this might usher in a new era of peace, inclusion, and mutual respect. Rabbi Chaim Ovadia.
Okay, I will finish the article and read Chabad, because I do want to finish this week. It depends, it depends on us. Technology is neutral. As powerful as it may be, it does not have free will. We use it as an instrument of our will. As long as we humans see ourselves as machines, we can always build a machine that's stronger. If we are just brains and minds, then we can replicate that. But if we are souls, not physical beings on a spiritual journey, but spiritual beings on a physical journey, then every machine or instrument, whether a hammer or a screwdriver or a computer or AI, is just a tool to help us fulfill a higher purpose. You could even program a machine to have transcendent values, but at the end of the day, a machine doesn't have a soul. Our challenge with AI is not to create checks on its power, though that has to be addressed, but to define what it means to be a human being. The Industrial Revolution gave us more free time, but we didn't necessarily use it for higher purposes. Likewise, if AI starts doing all our work, writing our programs, and even our thank you notes, what will we do with our time? Will we just play more video games? We'll be challenged to find out why we are here on Earth. So in that way, I think it's a blessing. So it's kind of interesting to see. I would say on the sort of on the Orthodox side of the house here, there is a hope or a wish that by being freed from some mundane tasks, it will influence us to address more spiritual, I would say, religious questions, rather than, AI, makes Erwin want to throw the machine out of the out of the room. I do remember a series that was on CNN or something where people had, and this was several years ago, so it's not modern AI. I'm going to stop sharing, where people had what amounted to a computer friend. And I don't recall whether there was, artificial speech or whether it was just texting, but it was fascinating to see many people really invested in a friendship relationship with this computer system. And I said it was almost frightening to see how that developed. One of the things that I've seen has been discussed lately more and more, I would say, is our disconnection from other people. There was a book written well, I guess it was quite a while ago, called Bowling Alone. And that is that, in the past, people would be bowling with friends and family and leagues and things. And now, when this book was written, the author said, while the number of people bowling has increased, there's a big increase in people bowling alone. So I also saw, I think it was a CNN piece about either the 80s or the 90s, and the effect that having many televisions in a house had on family dynamics. I suspect many of us, most of us, when we were kids, there was one TV in the house, and there might have been a fight over who's going to watch what, but watching television was a family event.
Right.
And now everyone has their own TV, and even if you don't have a TV, you have what amounts to a TV. I mean, it's amazing to me that, however, I don't know what it is. I can't
You
remember.
can tape DVR.
Basically, I can get every one of the cable channels on my phone, so I can watch programs. Sonia can watch program, but we're not necessarily watching together. So I think there is a modern tendency for us to be more isolated, and I know people seeing this in college campuses as well, that kids are more in their room, they're playing video games, they're doing that there is a decrease in socialization, and I think that's I think that's significant, but some don't. So let me call on Erwin, Bryce, Jerry, and then Alan. Erwin.
I watched last night 60 Minutes also, and this incredible scientist at the Silicon Valley, he created this chip, which is 10,000 times faster than the chip what they have now.
Mm-hmm.
And they showed a segment that Elon Musk signed up already because he want to be using it. But how much benefit that's going to help me or help my person who, because of the faster computer, faster.
You get the
Uh,
wrong answer faster.
Yeah,
Well, and
exactly.
you know, and I think about, you know, if it's a chip. I was talking with actually my trainer who says she has a person she's training that had a severe stroke, and half this man's body, and I think he's in his 40s, half his body just basically doesn't work. So if that chip can be used as an exoskeleton to restore movement and walking and so on, you know, a tool, a knife can be a surgeon's scalpel to repair, or it can be, you know, a knife to murder. You know, we have faster and faster chips. So now we have cruise missiles that can tap into GPS. And so the next step is, of course, you have missile systems that can intercept those missile systems. And you know, we sort of have a war of murderous devices. So I think it can be of great benefit, but it also, you know, ultimately that's why I think religion is so important, because it teaches us whether we obey or not, but it teaches us to use our intelligence to make the world a better place. Bryce.
Yeah, so back to your point with people having virtual friends. Okay.
Mhm.
The thing that I think the mechanism that depends upon is something that's deeply inherent in us, and that is that if something or someone sounds like it is an agent, that
Mhm.
it is an entity with wants and desires. Reading something coming out on the screen saying, "I want you to stand up right now." That's, you go, "Oh my gosh, it wants me." It's like you just impute or imbue anything that originates, that comes at you sounding like it's an agent with agency. It's just built into us through our socialization over millions of years.
Yeah, but I will say in these cases, there were people whose lives were moved by these
Well, I'm not
computers.
arguing. I'm not saying
Yeah.
that you can't be moved by it.
Mhm.
What I'm saying is, and the fact that someone is moved by it simply because they imagine that
Yeah.
this is coming from someone that is
Yeah.
really there.
It sort of
And
mimics human
simply
response.
because somebody imagines it doesn't mean it's not valuable. That's what
Magic 8-ball phenomenon.
that's
Okay,
what
so Jerry Kirschman and then Bob. I
I
think
just
you
said
had.
the
Oh, okay. Oh,
magic
okay.
8-ball phenomenon.
Okay.
That's all.
Okay. Bob.
The what people are calling artificial intelligence is more akin to machine learning. There's no real intelligence going on. The only intelligence is the guy who programmed the computer.
Right.
And what you have, for instance, many years ago, this was probably in the late 60s, early 70s, I worked on a project. We were doing a system for the outpatient pediatric clinic at Bellevue Hospital. I was working for NYU at that time. And one of the parts of the project was, number one, we built an information system for them. One of the first computerized systems for a hospital. And our particular area was the outpatient pediatric clinic at Bellevue Hospital. There were over 20,000 patients who were seen in that clinic in the course of a year or more, depending on how many visits. And we were working on the data being the patient's charts. And we were looking at how to do computer-aided diagnosis.
Right.
And remember, I emphasized the computer-aided part. Number one, we were very careful not to be practicing medicine because that would be illegal.
Mhm.
So the system that we were working on, it was essentially a statistical system.
Right.
You take
And-
you take the patient's charts, you look at the diagnosis, you look at the disease, and you come up with a system whereby if I put these symptoms with these severities into the program, it will look at this and it will assign probabilities.
Right, right. So I don't have any problem with that at all.
Yeah. I know. I mean, that is not artificial intelligence.
So I'm not actually not so hung up on definitions on all of this.
You know,
Chris, did
and-
you have a question you were going to ask? No. Okay, we thought I saw you.
and at the I've been judging projects for the California State Science Fair for about 20 years. And more, I'm seeing projects that are using machine learning and so forth to do things. We see lots of medical diagnosis programs, going to diagnose cancer, we're going to diagnose this, we're going to diagnose that. And it's all the same thing. There's nothing new there.
Yeah, it's just more computer power and more.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And the thing about, the latest chip that
More powerful
that came-
chips, faster
yeah.
chips. Yeah.
being 10,000 petaflops is a hell of a lot of computing power, because that works out to be something of
Yeah,
the
yeah,
order of 10 to the 18.
Yeah. Let's not.
Right.
Let's not make the rabbi do math.
Yeah.
That's right. I have to get my slide rule.
But yeah, hey, when you were designing your windmills, it would have been helpful.
Yes. And yeah, look, I have a car, and one of the things I love about it is adaptive cruise control. I don't know if that's artificial intelligence, but I love it because it speeds up and slows down, and it's got, radar and so on. I still have my foot poised above the brake, but it will stop, but it takes stress out of driving.
Rabbi, it's artificial intelligence if the manual says so.
That's right. They just look it up alphabetically. Alan.
Back to your book about the bowling alone. I don't remember if you mentioned why. So did they determine why more people are bowling alone, where you were describing how it's done in groups and leagues and stuff?
Yeah, I don't recall that discussion, but just that we are tending toward being more isolated.
Okay.
And maybe we have just so many opportunities for sort of individual entertainment that it's easy to be isolated, and it takes more effort to be. I mean, as I was discussing it, it occurred to me that an example of that is reading a book. That's a solitary, isolated, endeavor. Erwin, Out of the Darkness.
Yeah, I would like to ask you, Rabbi, how would you have you felt when your wife had your surgery and a machine would have come out and said, "Oh, Rabbi Lotker, your wife was doing very well," because the touch of the surgeon when he comes out and talks to you personally, that's a major lift. I cannot explain it to you, but patient and the family realize that man
Yes,
coming back.
yes, I agree with you. There's a human touch. In this case, the doctor called me on the phone and said, she's doing fine, and you should come like in an hour or two.
That could have been AI.
Yeah, it could have been. I would say it's particularly important if something goes wrong. If everything's okay, come in an hour and a half. I probably wouldn't make a big difference to me whether the doctor said that or I got a text that was automated. If there was something wrong, then I would want to look in the doctor's eyes. I would want to ask, the doctor, what does this really mean, and so on. So yeah. Bryce.
if I think if people want to really get a really good understanding of why AI is so much in the zeitgeist everywhere, it's everywhere you see it.
Uh-huh.
It's an arms race. It's an advertising arms race because as soon as one person, one product has AI, then
Yeah, yes.
everybody is at the board of directors saying, "Hey, can you put AI on our product?
Yeah.
I need to buy some AI
Right.
sandpaper."
And in fact, lasers were like that 10, 20 years ago. If you had laser surgery, laser this, laser that, people thought that was a great idea. Jim, you will have a final word.
Oh, oh God, I don't know if it's worth wrapping up with this, but this all may be inevitable. You talked about college students hanging out in their dorms, and maybe it's because this generation was locked up in COVID and didn't learn how to socialize, but
No, this was an issue, 10 or 20 years ago when I was doing interfaith
Oh,
programs on a college campus.
well, that's worse. They're not interacting, they're not having sex, they're not getting married, they're not having boyfriends and girlfriends. And as AI gets better, they may be more apt to go for spiritual guidance from their computers, which may be AI or not, than from somebody like you. And a good example, we went to a restaurant. It was a Japanese type restaurant, and they had a robot that was coming to each table and delivering the food and things. And it had a cute little electronic face on it, and a nice, a cute little female Asian voice came out, and people were polite to it. They
That's
they
very funny,
laughed
yeah.
at it. They
Uh-huh.
they talked to it, and as if it was real. And I didn't, and I was the oddball.
I know people who do that with cats. In fact,
Oh, they're alive.
yeah. So yes. Yeah, that's right. And I'll
Yeah, but
just
get 'em
reflect on
talking.
something that happened today. People call the Federation or Jewish Family Services, and they want to talk to a rabbi, and they give a couple of reasons why they want to talk to a rabbi. And I get the text or an email, and I call this person. And I spoke with this lady in her late 80s, I would say for almost an hour, and she just wanted to be heard. She wasn't interested in any specific information. Yeah, I gave her, some back and forth, but she really just wanted to be heard. And that is something that's clearly a matter of experience. Some people are calling in the middle of a crisis and they need, specific information, specific direction. They have a specific theological question. I would say, and I'm not, saying that eventually AI couldn't do this, but this lady just wanted to be heard. And that's, I think some of the things that were being discussed in the program. Anyway, thank you all for coming. Next week, the topic is going to be, I'll send this out and I'll send an article, which is in Jewish law and tradition, when may a man divorce his wife? And so the lady that does the publicity for these, when she said when, do you mean like what time of day or what, no, it
When
was
she gets
under what
out of
under what circumstances in Jewish law and tradition.
What if you married an AI?
What about a woman divorcing her husband?
Yeah,
Yeah.
that's not in Judaism. So that's one of the things. I mean, I read the article a while ago. One
What
of the
if
things
your
I'm
wife is an AI? What if you married an AI?
Mazel tov. And I'm leaning toward going. I don't know if you know what responsive literature is. I'm reading a book actually on responsive literature. I actually have bragging now. I have an astoundingly I have a complete collection of all Reform responsive literature. That would be impressive, except if you realize that you can access it all online, but you can't hold the books in your hands.
How many
Anyway,
books is that, Rabbi? Would you
Oh, I would say
approximately?
I must have at least some of the books are slim, but I probably have 40 or 50 volumes on
Okay, just curious. Yeah,
on
thanks.
Jewish law and responsa. And the cases are really
Mm-hmm.
interesting. And I don't know if you know this, but it's not Larry Huff. I know I forgot the guy's name. He recently wrote a book about responsa literature. I mean, like, so it was published in the last few weeks, and it's very, I find it very interesting. So anyway, we may see more of that. So anyway, thank you for coming, and I wish you for those of you observing 7 days of Pesach, it's open season on donuts. For those of you who are observing 8 days of Pesach, you know, matzah.
Hang in there.
Another day.
Another day, another crumb-filled room.
day.
Okay, so take care, and we'll see you Wednesday. We're talking about, I can't remember what we're talking. Oh, did Moses have horns? That's an interesting.
Happy matzah.
Yeah, happy matzah.
Good
Okay.
night, thank you.
Take care. Good night.